This video will cover Part 1 of Chapter 7, Sport and Performance Psychology for PSY 120, Careers in Psychology, Neuroscience, and Human Development. Sports psychology is, as your authors put it, the study of the psychological aspects of sport, physical activity, and performance. I can tell you that many of my students, my advisees, and just students in my class, many, if not most of them, have participated in sports or engage in physical activities as a regular part of their lives. And they often talk about how their psychological state means something important in terms of how they practice their sport, how they perform in their sport. I've had several groups of students over the years do senior research projects looking at stress and how it affects college athletes. So there's a rich research area here to be explored, as well as a clinical practice area. Sport and performance psychology works to help us understand the way in which a variety of psychological factors can impact performance in sports, but also the reverse. How does engaging in physical activity impact how various psychological factors play out? Like, how does it impact mood, for example? From a practice point of view, what you're talking about is professional psychologists and counselors who work with athletes at every level of sport, working to optimize their mental and physical performance. Sports psychologists can be involved in work with individuals. They can work with teams and individuals making up teams. And many of them are well versed in developmental as well as social psychological concepts, because all of those things also affect physical activity in sport. Some sports psychologists and also counselors who are trained in this area work with athletes and teams in order to improve their performance, to keep them performing at their peak level. For example, pretty much every professional sports team has a sports psychologist, at least one, on staff, and likely has a whole group of counselors who work with their athletes to keep them performing at their best. Sometimes they will work with athletes after injuries to help them rehabilitate, to deal with stress and anxiety that's associated with having to come through an injury. Sometimes it's when, an athlete has stress and psychological issues that are impacting their performance, and therapists can work with them to move their way through that as well. Sports psychologists can also do their work as pure researchers. So they may do research in their role as academics. They may work in government spaces, nonprofits, and other kinds of sports settings. So what are some of these research topics in sports psychology? So there's lots of different questions. I'm not going to read all of these, but certainly we could ask research questions about how do certain strategies help athletes to overcome anxiety and performance worries. How can we use our understanding as psychologists of intrinsic motivation to preserve long-term enjoyment in sports? How can we help athletes cope with burnout? And that's the topic that many of my senior research students have really pursued over the last several years. So there are a variety of research questions that sports psychologists pursue. I mentioned earlier that idea of studying psychological factors associated with injury and rehab. I've had a couple of student groups over the years who investigated specifically these issues of how does injury, and in some cases injury that ends a student athlete's career working in their sport, how does that impact people emotionally? How does it affect their identity, and so on? Other research questions have more to do with mental health and well-being, and that reverse thing. How does exercise improve psychological states. And then finally, there are lots of research questions that kind of hover on that barrier between psychology and sociology, looking at cultural factors, societal and demographic factors that are predictive of people's experiences psychologically with sport. So if you have interest in sports and athletics and exercise and its intersection with psychology, what kind of bachelor's degree options are out there? And I will say many of these, the starting point can actually be below the bachelor's level, meaning with a high school degree. So I'll try and sort some of those out for you. The first category of bachelor's level positions are recreation workers, managers, and directors of parks and recreation programs. Recreation workers, and this is one of the positions that can actually, in some cases, depending on the job description, be a job that you can qualify for with a high school degree, in some cases with an associate's degree, and certainly having a bachelor's degree can put you in an advantageous situation. These are workers who develop plans and organize and then run recreational activities for kids and adults in various settings. So say at the YMCA or at a city park that runs programming. Recreation managers are going to be in oversight positions over the workers. So the managers, they are far more likely to be required to have at least a bachelor's degree because they are in a managerial position. They have responsibilities for things like budgets and publicity and equipment and so on. So the expectation is typically for a bachelor's degree or higher. Parks and Rec directors, similarly, they are in an oversight position, looking at finances, budgets, reports, seeking funding, and so on. And they would be in the overarching position over several parks. So, you could have your recreation manager at one location, and the Parks and Rec director oversees many managers. Now, like the recreation managers, these are individuals who are likely to be required to have at least a bachelor's degree and in some cases a business degree. But psychology background can be very helpful because you're dealing with ways in which you can encourage people to engage with your spaces, to exercise, to use the equipment, and so on. Now, recreation workers tend to, the 2022 median annual wage for a recreation worker was about $31,000, whereas for recreation managers, about $67,000. So you can see the direction, the difference in level and why there would be a difference in level of training that's expected for that kind of work. Fitness instructors and personal trainers. I've actually had a couple of former students who were interested in this intersection between sport and psychology, and they went on, in one case, the student got a master's degree in sports psychology, and right now he runs his own personal training business where he works with people both online and in person. So what do fitness instructors and personal trainers do? They help to keep people motivated, whether it's individuals or groups, doing exercise activity and achieving the goals that they work with their personal trainer or fitness instructor to achieve. In some cases, you're working one-on-one with clients. For many personal trainers, they get additional education in nutrition and lifestyle so that they can work with clients holistically to meet their fitness goals. Fitness instructors and personal trainers can be employed in a lot of different environments, everything from university exercise spaces to nursing homes, country clubs, and rehabilitation centers. So, for example, if you are going through cardiac rehabilitation, they're often in your rehab program, which involves engaging in fitness activities, riding exercise bikes, walking, using stair steppers, and also doing weightlifting. Someone has to guide that work, and in some cases that is a fitness instructor who's doing that work in concert with other medical professionals. Many are involved in private settings, so either one-on-one where you're making a visit to someone's home, or where a client will come to your gym setup and get their training there. Many employers do require at least a bachelor's degree to work in this space. Generally speaking, we see higher degrees for people who move into personal training. Like some of them actually go beyond getting the bachelor's degree and get a master's degree in a variety of different fields, but it's not necessarily required. If you're going into business yourself as a personal trainer, what can be advantageous is to get certifications through national organizations. Having a degree in psychology plus some background in exercise science, health and nutrition is really an asset for people who want to work in this domain. There are also sport instructors and coaches. I have lots of students who have been athletes. They love sports and they would like to continue to work with athletes after their undergraduate career. I have a couple of students, advisees who just graduated, for example, who decided they wanted to go on and get the coaching minor so that they could seek employment with their bachelor's degree doing coaching with athletes, particularly high school athletes, but also in youth leagues and the like. Sport instructors are going to work with athletes or teams to build skills. So, I'm thinking of there's this facility near my house where baseball and softball athletes can go and get instruction on hitting and fielding to build their skills. So they are working with sport instructors who have specialized skills in those areas, but also who are really, really good at working with athletes. Coaching is a bit different because you're hired to be the leader of a team and then take them into competition. And depending on the location, coaching has different requirements for entry into the field. Coaches are often in the situation, particularly in team sports, to mentor athletes about how to work together and do so effectively. Coaches, like sport instructors, can be engaged in teaching fundamental skills and helping athletes with their performance. Having a bachelor's degree in psychology is very useful for sport instructors as well as for coaches. I have noticed that one of our more recent additions to our curriculum in the psychology program at Mount Union is a course in sports psychology. That class fills, and a lot of the people who are in that class are athletes. And some of them are really seeking to go to continue their lives connected to sport by being instructors or coaches, sometimes both. In 2022, if you're looking at K through 12, coaches in elementary and secondary schools, the median salary is about $45,000. There is some expectation of an increase in the numbers. One thing you need to keep in mind about coaching, however, at the K through 12 level is that many of these jobs require that you have an education degree and a certificate, a license so that you can be in the classroom working with kids. So you really have to do your homework and look at the job requirements and the educational requirements of that specific position. Physical education teachers, and these are people who have a teaching degree. They may or may not have a psychology background directly, but it is useful for them. So PE teachers help K through 12 students learn about physical fitness and build physical skills. Like other teachers, they build lesson plans and activities to encourage exercise and fitness and to learn about the benefits of those kinds of activities. PE teachers usually, those who are employed in K through 12 settings, usually have a major in education and then get a teaching certification in that domain. Now, if it's a person who's looking specifically at the high school level, they may actually major in another discipline like exercise science or psychology, sometimes both, and then get their certification as a high school educator. So there are some alternative pathways to becoming a PE teacher that don't involve having an education major. PE teachers may also teach other courses at their schools, so health courses, sometimes discipline-specific courses as well. I had an advisee several years ago who was determined to be a high school science teacher, but he was also very invested in coaching and PE education. And as he kind of got more experience and did some more investigating, he was able to carve out a nice niche for himself as a person who taught science, but also was teaching PE courses as well. Most teachers do major in education at the undergraduate level, unless you're talking about individuals who are subject matter teachers who are teaching at the high school level. Those individuals may, in fact, major in their discipline specialty, but also take a lot of education courses to prepare them for certification. Psych majors who want to go into education, they typically have to complete some post-baccalaureate teaching programs, or if your university offers it, you can get your high school level certification while you're completing your major in your subject area. A more recent addition, and by recent I mean within the last couple of decades, to this area of interest is using data analytics in sport. Certainly as we're moving into this bizarre territory of the intersection between gambling and sport, there's even more openings for people who are really good with data and research and plucking out information from data that can help make predictions about outcomes. They're becoming even more valuable. Now, originally, sports data analysts or sports statisticians, you'll find in many professional sports, particularly in sports like baseball and football, where the data analysts are going to try and look for trends and patterns in the way athletes are performing, and that can inform the decisions made by the organization about, how does this player's performance look going forward? Who should we trade? Who should we look for? If there are people out on the trade market, what does the data say about their likelihood of performing well or performing poorly? The sport data analysts are also going to be engaged in helping these organizations to find out information about their fans, because without the fans buying the tickets and the merchandise, they're not going to have money to build the organization. So sports data analysts could also be involved there. In some cases, sport data analysts are employed in the media, in the sport media, to give them information so that they can share that information and draw insights from it. So if you're interested in these topics and you want to know what kind of coursework is going to be helpful for me to get these bachelor's level type jobs, as with most of the career areas that we've looked at so far, abnormal psych and psychopathology can be helpful. Biopsych, cognitive psych, developmental, ethics, counseling, motivation, research methods and stats, social psych, and specifically sports psych can be helpful. Elective work, since many of these career paths intersect with other fields like exercise science and sports science, as well as biology and chemistry, we see a lot of kind of mixing of minors and double majors. So you may want to seek out coursework in anatomy and physiology, exercise science, health education, nutrition, and so on. If you're specifically looking at being a sport instructor or a coach, you may want to take coursework in that domain as well. What kind of applied and research experiences are useful for getting these kinds of bachelor's level careers? On the applied side, getting experience in any kind of mental health context can be useful. Just getting practice, working with people, talking with people, helping them to be comfortable, and so on can be great. But you can also find internships and field experiences in much more strongly sport-related environments, like working in athletic departments, working at camps, working with youth and adult sport programs, and so on. The types of research experiences, seeking out a faculty member who has specific interests in sport and exercise psychology can be really a great experience for people to have. But there's also faculty you can seek out who study leadership, who study goal setting and performance motivation as well. And those research projects can come from a variety of different programs. That concludes part 1 of Chapter 7.